AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guests today, we have two guests today, is Jenny Zhang and Jason Kim from Immuneering. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you, JP.
Hello.
Great. Well, let's start, guys, with a brief background of yourselves. Talk us through your own technical background, how you first got involved in technology, and a brief summary of your journey taking us up to your current positions at Immuneering.
Sure, I will go first. So before coming to Immuneering, I did an undergraduate in physics at MIT, and then a PhD in cancer genomics at Duke University. And I was actually sort of a late bloomer into this whole field of programming, machine learning, and data science. So I started graduate school as a primarily experimental person, but around that time, the technology started existing for huge amounts of data. And then at some point, I started to learn that Excel just really wasn't going to cut it for text files that were tens of gigabytes. So fortunately, towards the beginning of graduate school, I was able to start building up this techno background by learning through excellent classes online, as well as taking undergraduate level courses at Duke as a graduate student. And I started throughout my PhD to do more and more computational work so that I transitioned at the end where I was mostly a computational biologist. And towards the end of my PhD, I was thinking about what to do next, and the term data science was becoming more and more popular, and I wanted to catch a wide net. So I did a data science fellowship program at the Data Incubator. It's an 8-week program for what they call recovering academics. And they train academics in data science industry skills and then connect them to companies. And the funny thing is, as I was interviewing with partners of the Data Incubator and describing my graduate school background in cancer genomics and connecting mutations to clinical outcome, people kept saying, "Oh, that's so cool. Why would you walk away from that kind of work?" And fortunately, one of the partners with the Data Incubator was Immuneering. So that's where I am now, using my graduate school skills as well as these data science skills as the director of Genomic Data Science.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Jason, talk to us about your journey, please.
Sure. So my name is Jason Kim, and I am the Associate Director of Biomedical Informatics at Immuneering. And I actually come from a slightly different background from most of my colleagues, who most of them have a PhD and they're trained scientists like Jenny is. I actually studied biomedical engineering at Northwestern University and worked in technical consulting, doing software implementation in the pharma industry for about 5 to 6 years. So I was always kind of interested in the power of technology and always enjoyed coding and what it can do. But I realized I wanted to do more of a research and analytics work in biomedicine. So I essentially had a slight career shift, went back to graduate school at NYU for a master's, and with a strong interest in machine learning and AI. And it's about 2 years since I joined Immuneering.
Thank you for that, Jason. Really appreciate it. So before moving on to who Immuneering are and what you guys do, Jenny, you talked about that transition from academia to industry and using a boot camp to bridge that gap. Can you give us some insight into how you went about making that successful transition?
Sure. So I was definitely really nervous about this. If you just speak to academics, they say that going to industry, like, it makes you feel like you're choosing to step off a cliff or something. But what helped me a lot was that at Immuneering, almost everybody came from an academic background. So there was a lot of support in making that transition and learning about the skills. I would say that in my first couple of months at Immuneering, there were two particular areas that I had to learn a lot. The first one was with how to go about working on projects to ahead of time create a time scale scope of the work, deadlines, have goals for when to deem a project completed. Whereas my experience in academia was that it was just more open-ended, and there was more of just going in some direction because it seemed interesting, and not as much of a regimented idea of a roadmap. So that was one aspect. Another aspect was really learning how to build production code with a lot of focus on version control, both with the code itself and with the software environment. So in graduate school, as with many people, I was hacking things together and getting it to work. And sometimes if I wanted to run something 3 months later, it would just require a lot of luck and hoping, and then possibly troubleshooting. And in industry, at Immuneering in particular, I learned how to build this in a more controlled, reproducible environment. So actually these skills, which I got a lot of help from colleagues in building, I think are very valuable even in academia.
Jason, for yourself, how did you get this role, and what were some of the challenges in getting to the position of working at Immuneering?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I essentially had a career shift, and even though they both involved technical work, the transition wasn't so easy. So when I was first looking to transition, it was hard to get my foot in the door, where I could kind of find a job in this field and learn on the job. So I realized I had to go back to school, and that's when I went back to graduate school. And afterwards, I wanted to find an internship actually first, because I wanted to see what it was like in the industry to work in this particular field, and actually found Immuneering through a New York City-backed internship matching program that was designed to aim to enhance New York City's life sciences industry. And so I started off as an AI intern over the summer, then converted to full-time afterwards. Thankfully, we both liked each other, and it worked out well. But I would say, not to be afraid of switching careers, especially if you know what you're passionate and interested about, and it's really worth it in the end, even if it means going back to school or taking an internship to find the right fit. And yeah, now here I am.
That's great, really useful advice there. So thank you for that. So Immuneering, can you tell us about Immuneering, origins behind the organization, and what you guys work on?
Sure. So Immuneering has several main areas of focus. The first of which is the Bioinformatics Services area. And this is actually the oldest component of the company, and it's still actively thriving and growing because we've built a really good reputation. And what the Bioinformatics Services component of the company does is help pharmaceutical companies analyze their data. And this can range from big, well-established companies that have their own bioinformatics department, but have so much data, they really need help to get through all the goals they have in analyzing the data, to brand new companies that have no bioinformatics team and need help building things from the ground up. And we work with companies everywhere between those extremes. Another component of the company that is a bit newer is in drug development in specific diseases of interest. So the company has pipelines in the disease areas of oncology, neuroscience, and immuno-oncology. And what helps to accelerate the research in those programs is the Immuneering Platforms team, which uses AI and machine learning, and we call it the Disease Canceling Technology Platform. And that's where Jason and I work. And what makes this platform unique is that it draws from over 10 years of experience working with pharmaceutical companies, which has put us in a really unique position of understanding what tools would be valuable for accelerating the process and really understanding some of the pain points in the current drug discovery process. And the platform has two components, one of which is called Cosigner, which allows for data-driven target discovery using gene expression data. And the second part is Fluency, where Jason and I work. And that is where we use GPU-accelerated neural networks to identify drugs more rapidly.
Very interesting. So I want to know more. Can you talk to me then about the AI platform for drug discovery? Can you give us some insight how you're utilizing AI and machine learning to improve this process?
Yeah, so to specifically talk about fluency, which is the model that Jenny and I work on, mainly it's a deep learning model that we've been developing. And the model essentially learns to predict binding affinity between small molecules and proteins. And it's trained on millions of curated experimental data. And it can screen over 10 million compounds for a target in a matter of hours, and to point the researchers into the right direction to know which molecules to test. And this would normally take months to years, and you would imagine a lot of money to do this experimentally, and probably not even feasible to do over 10 million compounds. And the usual workflow for us is to utilize this platform to narrow the focus to a quantity of molecules that is tractable by experimentation, obviously. And the goal is to enrich for a chance of success for the number of molecules tested during this hit finding phase of drug discovery. If we test 100 or 1,000 molecules, then the molecules that is outputted by fluency will definitely have a higher chance of binding, as we have seen experimentally.
So what separates your platform? What separates Immuneering from others who are operating in this space? Can you give us some insight into how you guys stand out from the rest and how you distinguish your platform from the hype that's associated with AI?
Of course. I think the biggest advantage we have is the domain knowledge and to understand and interpret the data and the results. It's not really just about crunching numbers and simply lowering the loss, but really interpreting the data, diving into it, what we're feeding into the model, including certain biases that may really make sense only from a biological standpoint, and also interpreting the data and the results for what it really means in the real world. We're also doing thorough benchmarking of the models that makes scientific sense to us, and not just producing quote unquote good best performance metrics on the randomly split test set. We're being very intentional about that. And also I would say, this comes not just from us, but from all the experts at the company and our collaborators. For example, we have medicinal chemists that we work with on the drug design aspect of it, because neither of us is formally trained on that aspect. Other teams that Jenny mentioned at Immuneering that focus on specific disease areas of oncology or neurodegenerative diseases, they put their input and their expertise as well. And we're generating our own data and also running experiments through CROs and getting real experimental data as well.
Right, and I would add to it, just as Jason mentioned, this close collaboration with the other parts of the company, namely the pipelines. So this is really not a theoretical tool that we're trying to dazzle people with the number of parameters or weights or the size of the model or how fast it runs. It's not waiting to be deployed. It's something being actively used for research within the company. And the strength there is that we have a very quick feedback loop between our development and what impact that makes on research within the company. It's really playing a role in real world drug discovery. And a huge aspect of that is actually we put a lot of work into making the AI platform accessible to stakeholders within the company so that it just doesn't live in our hands. So the code base is very complex, and we had to build a front end for it in the form of a web app. But what this allowed was for other people in the company to run very sophisticated calculations through the web app without having to know how the code works. So end users can use the web app to interactively query for their favorite gene or drug. We are not their bottleneck to run some analyses. And if they want to do this 10+ million drug screen on their favorite gene, as Jason pointed out, they can do it on their own. They don't have to talk to us or wait for us to get it done. And then they can interpret the outputs with their knowledge and specific domain knowledge of their diseases of interest. So it's not just about the strength of the underlying AI model, but also its interpretability and usability to the end user. And we work closely with our end users to make sure that the tool and the model do what they need it to do to help them with their research.
So focusing on the environment and talking about, why you guys do what you do, can you give us some insight into what you love about your role, what it's like to work at Immuneering, and just help us understand what the environment is like while you work on these complex problems?
I think we'd both be very happy to answer that question. So my take on the question is that I think my favorite part is just working with a ton of very smart people who all have kind of different backgrounds. So we all learn from each other and teach each other, and there's no egos involved there. So we're all making each other better at the work that we're trying to get done together. And along with that, there's just a very strong culture of learning, both between team members and individually. So on the technology and AI side, where Jason and I live, we're really encouraged to keep up with the newest technologies and literature and research and rapidly apply them to our work. So that just makes it a lot of fun, very challenging, and never gets boring because it's always changing. And I would say that the other really nice thing about the company is that it has the financial stability that an established 12-year-old company is able to provide. But the culture is really that of a startup in the aspects of nimbleness, informality. We're all have sense of humor and joke with each other, and also cohesiveness and togetherness. So the company still meets as a whole once a week, and that's really important in these times of COVID.
I think that's a great insight. Thank you so much. Jason, anything you'd add on your end?
Yeah, of course. I agree with all the points that Jenny mentioned. And I would just add that, there's a strong sense of purpose from all the employees, not just treating the work that we do as quote unquote work, but really being passionate towards finding treatment for the diseases. And some members of the team, have family who experience the diseases that we work to treat, and some are involved in organizations to raise awareness, et cetera. So, there's definitely a personal component to the work that we do as well. And I think this translates quite well nowadays, being all remote due to the circumstances. Everyone is still motivated and really, running on all cylinders, going strong. And it also wasn't really that big of a shock to transition, because a lot of the foundation was already built from having multiple offices and a lot of collaboration between all the offices as well. And I guess I should mention lastly that we were also recently certified as a great place to work, result of surveying all the employees, and turns out that 100% of us agree that it's a great place to work. So I think that speaks for itself.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a great segue into my next question: is what's the opportunities available for people who are interested in potentially being a part of the team at Immuneering? Give us some insight into the types of positions that you guys are going to need in the near future, and more importantly, the types of individual that you look for.
So we're always open, even when we're not listing jobs, for exceptional people. But currently we are actually literally hiring in many departments, and people should check out the website for details on the different job positions that are open. And even with this current situation of remote work, we are actively hiring, and some individuals might find it kind of daunting to try to make changes or start a new job in what's going to start out as a remote role. But since mid-March, when all of the shutdowns happened, we have onboarded multiple people, and it's been very well established. So people should feel very safe in that. In terms of what kind of people we look for, I think we care a lot about how people think and work with data. And there are some aspects that are specific to certain departments, of course. So, for example, a common part of the job application process with us is to give a talk, sort of a research talk, with the team or teams that you might be joining with. And some things that might be specific to particular departments are, for example, like if someone is interviewing for a position with Bioinformatics Services, then what we really care about is how they build methods, work with data, use bioinformatic tools. And we may not necessarily care as much about the biological background of their particular disease area that they were researching. To contrast with that, in the positions that are with more of the disease-associated pipelines, then it may be more important to know the knowledge of that disease in particular. And then in the platforms area where Jason and I are, then the technical background in artificial intelligence and machine learning is, of course, very important. But also the idea of how somebody evaluates these tools and keeps a really critical and skeptical eye and cares about what the outcome means from these model predictions. So I hope that sums up what we look for in new team members.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to hear that there's many different paths to work in such an environment that, some from the scientific background, but some with the technical background. So that's, I appreciate you giving us some insight there. What does the future of Immuneering look like? When you look ahead and you think about what's in store, what can we expect and what are you guys excited about?
So our Bioinformatics Services is still going strong. It's kind of the bread and butter with new incoming clients and many ongoing projects, which will continue. And we're also really just excited to see our company growing in all the other areas of drug discovery. And we'll continue to develop our AI platforms that could practically assist in that drug discovery process with the immediate reward of seeing it being used internally. And we're all just very excited about where we're headed as a company and what we're doing.
And we're very excited to see all that you guys can accomplish. It's an incredibly exciting space to be in. Clearly, you guys have got the right mix of super talented people working really hard, but also a good culture. And we're very much looking forward to seeing you all continue to grow. So Jason and Jenny, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, JP.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.